welcome you all on behalf of Rijeka 2020 European Capital of Culture. This is the last day of our conference titled Invisibles, Diversity in Culture and Creative Industries. We are especially pleased to welcome here Dr. Manovich, who will give you a talk titled Space, Time and Diversity in Contemporary Global Culture. I guess you all know his biography, but he's a leading theorist of digital culture globally. He's the author of 13 books, including classic that we all read, Language of the New Media. He's also director of Cultural Analytics Lab, and the talk that he will give today is connected with his research in Cultural Analytics Lab. After his talk, he will be joined by another digital wizard, that's Vuk Ćosić, in a format called Vuk Ćosić in Conversation with Lev Manovich. Welcome, Lev.
Thank you so much for having me. It's only my third time in Croatia and first time in this region, but trust me, I'll be back. You have a beautiful space. You have a very kind of faces full of character, intellect, and beauty. So I feel so much at home. So, as it was mentioned, since 2005, I've been thinking and exploring the use of computational methods which sometimes associated with such keywords as AI or machine learning, but actually we go decades back. You can also think of natural language processing, which begins in the 50s, or computer vision, which begins in the 60s. So these methods, right, are used throughout industry, right? So every time you take a picture of your phone, in the case if it's a Google phone, there's 32 algorithms which analyze the picture before it's saved to memory card, and that's why it's kind of very hard to take bad pictures today. Okay? Or for example, right, when you have a setting, so you take a picture and the picture automatically, right? The picture automatically taking when somebody smiles, so you need to detect smiles. So with computational analysis of text, images, video, and other forms of media, it really forms the foundation of media culture in the 21st century. Right? So search engines such as Google, Yandex, and so on, right, depend on computational analysis of billions of pages, recommendation systems, right, Amazon, Netflix, and so on, right, analyze hundreds of thousands or millions of items in their databases and the activity, right, of millions of users to try to give you recommendations. And they're designed not to steer you towards the same things you like, because that would be stupid. Because computer scientists are very smart, actually, and there's a huge, literature in computer science on how to build kind of recommendation engines. So the idea is to both give you things you like, but also expose you to things you haven't seen. So I said, okay, this is the reality of media. First of all, I have to learn about these methods so I can think about them critically. And the secondary, because there are so many cultural artifacts and activities are going on today, and I will quantify it later in the talk, so maybe I can use the same methods for kind of humanistic or media theory or cultural studies analysis to understand trends and patterns in contemporary global culture, and also just simply to see it. Right? So, as we say in the short description of our lab, right, today people around the world create, share, interact with billions of new digital artifacts every day. So we kind of need new methods for seeing culture at its new scale and velocity. So here I'm talking about kind of normal, right, casual users. But of course, we also have, let's say, 20 million people who are using Adobe products. So it's at least 20 million designers, architects, photographers. It's been estimated there are 20 million programmers in the world, right? So there's like another 50 million of culture professionals, curators, festival organizers. And we also create so many things. I mean, think about how many festivals with scale are taking place today around the world, right? Must be thousands. And that just was not the case 15 years ago. So if we want to see properly, right, inclusively, what's happening in culture today and see it in full diversity, and not only focus on the old, predominantly Western centers of culture, Tokyo, New York, London, Berlin. If you want to see what's happening in Rijeka and Tyumen, and Minsk, how can we do it when the culture became like physics, right? I think there are so many cultural artifacts being created every day that, okay, don't worry, that it's like atoms, right, in the universe. So it's not accidental that many people who now working on analysis of culture comes from physics. So in the 19th century, right, before sociology was born, people like Comte were talking about social physics. So today there is a question, maybe we can have a cultural physics. Not to discover laws which govern culture, but the opposite. A kind of physics or a kind of biology or just the way biology studies biodiversity, how can we have the proper methods to see and understand the patterns in cultural diversity? So the topic of cultural diversity, right, is of course very central to contemporary social, cultural, ideological, political discourse, and also the discourse around culture industry, creative industries. So this is one of many understandings of cultural diversity. Right? So cultural diversity means there are many voices, many expressions, many ideas as opposed to monoculture. Right? And then if you go to this, basically, I haven't been to a library since 2001. I just read Wikipedia. It's kind of enough for me, 99% of the time. And then I travel. That's how I do research. So people say, how can we quantify diversity? Because we want to compare cultural diversity not in one city, not in one, let's say, exhibition. We have so many artists from so many countries. If we want to understand patterns of cultural diversity across regions, countries, or world, if we're dealing with millions of objects, we have to measure it. Otherwise, we just go to a cafe and have these endless conversations. Is globalization leads to monoculture, and it's basically a waste of your time, right? Better go swimming. So there's in fact huge literature, and also have been attempts in groups by UNESCO and other organizations like this to create measures of cultural diversity. So one, again, very easy traditional way to think about it is to think about diversity of languages and to count how many languages disappear, every day. But that's not, right? That's not the only way. So it turns out that diversity is not only the subject discussed in cultural, social, political sphere, but diversity is a concept which is used in dozens of scientific fields, ranging from biology, demographics, and many, many others. And beginning in the early 40s, researchers started to propose ways to measure diversity, and these measures they're called diversity indexes. Right? And again, if you start looking at these Wikipedia articles, because most of these measures were developed in biology, right, and ecology, the examples talk about like species, right, animals, but it's very easy to apply to our fields, right? So there's basically, right, there's lots of indexes. So let me explain to you, don't worry about formulas. Let me explain to you kind of, let's say, two very common ideas. So one idea is to say, okay, I want to compare the diversity of like this forest and that forest. Forest here and forest here. How many different species live in each forest, right? So this forest has, some wolves and some, my English is not bears, right? And lizards. Okay, so this forest has like 5 species. This forest has 10 species. So the second forest is more diverse, and it's like in fact twice as diverse. So that's one method, very, very simple, easy to understand. So maybe if we apply it to culture, and we want to compare offerings, right? Musical offerings in two cities, like let's say Rijeka and I don't know, Mirabor, whatever you want. We can say, okay, what are the different types of, what are the different music genres? Like we invite artists to perform in clubs and in philharmonic. So we can say, according to Spotify, there's maybe something like 1900 music genres. So we can say how many different genres have been represented in music programs of the city over last year, right? So that's one way to do it, and that's a good way. But when scientists, we like to complicate things. And there was a second set of ideas developed. And those of you who maybe know about mathematical theory of communication, developed by Claude Shannon, right, during the war, perhaps one of maybe most important concept of 20th century, right, the way to measure information. So the same ideas have been applied to measuring diversity in any system. And the next two sentences will be a bit technical, but it's actually not that hard to understand. So if you remember how Shannon kind of defined entropy, which is connect diversity. So the idea is that if you have message, right, and the message, let's say if you have a message which is coded in I don't know in Serbian or Slovenian or Russian, right? And there is let's say there's 30 letters in this alphabet, and now I'm going to write messages, whatever. It doesn't mean it can be like numbers, right? It can be secret codes, right? It can be Stasi messages, doesn't matter. So if each letter has a probability of appearing equally frequently, it's very hard for me to predict the next letter, right? So the next letter can be, let's say in English, A, Z, L, M. So if every letter can appear equally frequently, like this message, right, has most information. So Shannon said we need to build a bigger communication channels. And people said, great. So let's apply this idea to measuring biodiversity. So now let's do it. So let's say we have two forests. So one forest has 5 bears, 3 wolves, and 3, who else? Foxes. Who? Foxes, okay. Right? So we have 3 species and we have different number, right, of instances of actual animals. And the second forest just has 10 foxes and 1 bear. Okay? So according to this measure, which will be a number, the first forest will be more diverse. Right? So here what you do is you count both number of species and you count number of instances. So let's say now we go and apply it to music diversity, comparing Rijeka to Mirabor to Buffalo, New York, whatever you want, right? So we can say, okay, let's get programs of all music clubs for 1 year, and let's put into a formula how many different genres were represented in these music programs, and how many different music acts, how many performances, right, took place in each genre. So for example, in City X, you maybe had 20 genres, and each genre had at least few acts. In the second city, maybe had 5 genres, and 10 instances of one and 100 of another. Again, first city more diverse. So notice that none of this, right, none of these approaches is perfect. Like all the measurements in science, right? You can measure something, but not everything, which may be not true, right? You can maybe measure mass, maybe in physics. So same thing goes with inequality measures. When we compare countries, right, using Gini coefficient of inequality, right, when you have this complex phenomena and diversity is something which is impossible to define once and for all, right? You can have different definitions of diversity. So each measure captures something, but not everything. Okay. So UNESCO around 2005, 2006, we created a whole group. We invited people. There's a huge literature about it. We started to see we can use these measures to measure the cultural diversity in different countries of cultural exports and imports. So it's a huge field. If I go to Google Scholar, right, which tries to index all the articles published in various journals, right, if I just put cultural diversity, right, I get some kind of huge number. And let's say I want to filter and only find the articles which actually quantitative, which measure something. So maybe I will say put data, Okay, so still get too much. Okay, maybe I only want to find articles which are using data to compare some kind of cultural diversity between different countries. And this is not precise, right? But okay, so now we get something still a lot, right? So it's huge, right? Huge. So I just did this search, right? Before we started, and the first article which came up, right? So article in China, which looks at music in China, measuring diversity of music taste in online music society. Right? So you can also, for example, probably measure this for Spotify and others. So if you download data about users, and if you have data about what the users listen to, of course, it has to be anonymized. You can basically figure it out, and again, you go inside and there's all kinds of formulas. But if you really want to talk about diversity in a more precise way, you kind of have to do it, right? Okay. Or you can stick to this more qualitative traditional article. So here is some article: the internet platform's impact on the diversity of cultural expressions. Right? There's theory, but there's no number. So I don't know, right? Maybe it's very interesting theory, but how do I prove it? So I was also seduced, right, by this idea that I can measure something. So I will show you some of the attempts of projects which we created in my lab to see how we can look at diversity in cultural expressions, but in a different way, right? So not just measuring how many species are, not just measuring how many species, how many instances, but actually looking inside cultural artifacts, right? And using computational methods to try to analyze the structure, the form, and the content of images, videos, and text. So here's like basically, if you didn't understand, if you're not going to, if what I'm saying is maybe not really clear, but there is one idea which I kind of want you to remember from this whole talk. So a typical, let's say, UNESCO-sponsored study about cultural diversity, there's hundreds of them. Let's look at diversity of film industry, of film distribution in different countries. So we take Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, France, Taiwan, etc. We see how many films were shown this year, and how many films were shown from each country. So if country X has shown 100 American films and 2 national films, that's not so great. And if country B showed 10 films each from 20 countries, according to this measurement, it's more diverse, right? So that's great. So what do? We basically don't really look inside the film, right? We only look at from what country came film, or maybe like how much money it made in the box office, or maybe like how many, from which country came the director, maybe it's co-production. So we're only looking at what's called cultural metadata, right? So my idea already for 7 or 8 years, and if you want to publish it, great, because I will publish it, but like I'm kind of lazy. So next year is, let's say, well, actually it's kind of not very relevant from what country is a film, right? So it's not maybe very relevant if we want to measure kind of diversity of films. People see in movie theaters, so people maybe see on Netflix or on TV, or maybe on DVD, which you bought illegally, right? Doesn't matter, if these films are from what country. What are the genres of these films, right? Is it drama? Is it comedy? Is it some kind of sports comedy? Is it a national thing? So that's already better, right? Is maybe you have 100 films from 10 countries, but we're all basically action flicks, right? Well, and then now we can go a bit deeper, right? So that's where computer comes in, right? Because when computer, right, analyzes every time you, let's say, point camera, right? And it tries to figure out what kind of scene you're looking at. So it already happens before you take the camera, right? With all these phones. So when you take a picture, it says, oh, that's a beach scene. I'm going to tune the colors. Oh, that's a face. Right? So computer looks at the pixels, computer looks at lines, at shapes, and then it tries to figure it out, right? Or maybe there's lots of blue. Maybe it's a sky, right? Maybe there's a round thing with some like mouth. Maybe it's a person. So we can also apply these methods, right, to cultural artifacts. So now we can say, well, what style of editing do this film have? Are we all like very fast, or maybe we're very slow? Maybe we're like Tarkovsky type slow films, right? Or what kind of spaces are being represented in these films? Is it only 3 spaces? Is it 3 spaces? What kind of shots we have, right? So we can actually computationally now detect many of these features, and then why not use this for understanding and measuring diversity, right? So the idea is that, again, to summarize, the traditional approaches which develop in 2000, 2010s, which are very popular, especially with organizations like UNESCO, right? It's basically looking at data about the films or music or theater performances or books, right? So how many books were sold from different countries, right? But what's inside these books, right? That matters. Both the content, yeah? maybe all these films, are maybe all these books were sold represent women in a very demeaning way. How do you do that? Well, how do you, or maybe we all have some Proust-like structure, right? How do you know that? You can actually go and calculate it and measure it with natural language processing. So that's the idea. So I try to do it, and it's kind of exciting. But of course, I also realized it's a very incomplete approach, because once you say I want to understand diversity in the level of cultural form and content, can we measure every aspect of cultural form, right? So let's say there are dresses, right, being made by young Croatian designers. Well, how do I measure them, right? Do I measure colors? Do I measure shape? Do I measure the way you feel when you wear this dress? Transparency, right? So I will show you a few examples. And again, the idea that this is not the truth, it's a kind of experiment. Then I will show you our current project, which is actually trying to approach it in a kind of different way. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Yes. First of all, just to show you that this is not just something I'm interested in, right? So this idea is other people start doing it. So this is a project from New York Times, right? Hard to get more mainstream, which actually uses exactly the same idea from last year. It's interactive, so you should find it online. And again, what we want to do is we want to measure the changing diversity of musical hits, and not just looking at the genre of songs, but actually looking inside at the features of song. So we downloaded, we made a list of all the Billboard top 100 hits from I think 60s to 70s onward. So basically the top 100 songs which were popular in America every summer. And then we went to Spotify, found the songs, and then we got the data from Spotify, which you can get, everybody can get it. We analyze the tempo, the rhythm, the violence, the energy of every song. And so let's actually look at the character of the songs, right? Let's look at the tempo and rhythm and key, and to see if these features became more diverse or not, right? So here's the idea, right? So every song, right, can be represented as a kind of circle on these 5 dimensions. So 5 dimensions, again, are loud, in this case, loudness, average volume, energy. So it's a mathematical measure, how fast and how noisy the song sounds. Then there is interesting thing, danceability, so how strong and how regular is the beat. Acousticness, so kind of prediction, does the song use acoustical instruments? And also valence, is it like cheerful, is it not cheerful? Again, obviously that's not measuring everything, but it's pretty good. So now you can represent every song by connecting these measures, right? So in this case, you get this not perfect circle. So this song has a more higher than average valence, more cheerful, and doesn't look like it maybe has acoustical instruments. So then, we overlaid these visualizations, right? So for each year, right, we draw this kind of shapes for every song. And the nice thing is you don't need to know anything about measurement. You don't need to know anything about statistics of Claude Shannon. You can kind of visually see what's happening, right? So you can see in like 87, right? Sorry. So to help you see it, we colorized it. So the pink color means all these shapes are more different. So it means the music hits this summer were more different from each other. And then the yellow means they're more similar. And again, it's actually, I was kind of wrong, right? So when you actually look at it visually, it's actually hard to say what's going on. So that's why you have to measure, and if you measure it what we claim is that, like 88, you see, 89, 1980, 1990, lots of difference. Even we can see how in the last few years, things are much more similar, which to me kind of makes kind of intuitive sense, right? Like if you go to YouTube and you look at all the videos of like the Eurovision, you can see how everybody looked different. Around 2000, we all start looking the same, right? We all went to the same kind of plastic surgeon, or probably you know, it's like you kind of it basically supports with thesis of monoculture. But the nice thing about measurements, you can get more precise. And it turns out your intuitions are not always correct. So then we say, actually, so now what we do, it's the same thing where we just plotted this, right? So each dot is an average for that year. And we pink, right, the dots which are lower pink, it means they're more different. And then if dots are high and they're more yellow, it means they're, right? So you can see how, right? I mean, what's nice is that, yes, you know, we can go have coffee, cappuccino, you know, espresso, whatever coffee drink you like, and we can say, yeah, you know, I haven't been everywhere, but you do get the sense that things are becoming the same. First of all, is it correct? And also how? So here we can see very clearly that in fact, you know, we hit with a kind of, right, with a pretty high diversity from 1970 until about 97, and then suddenly it jumps. And you can do it for fashion, you can do it for whatever, right? Now, again, this is not talking about all the music. This is not talking about all the 45 million songs on Spotify. It's only talking about music hits. But that's still meaningful, right? So the diversity of hits which were most popular in the States during a number of summers. And then we say, well, actually, things are not so bad, because you can see how at the end, after 2013, you know, the pattern gets reversed. So we're saying, well, actually, you know, things are getting a bit better. Okay, so now let me show you a couple of things, visual things, what we did. Very simple. So I think I already opened this, so just a second. Yeah, open this. Okay, yeah. Sure. Okay. So this is one of the projects we've done in 2009, when you know, one of my people in the lab said, "Lev, looks like Time magazine." You know, Time magazine was this illustrated magazine, right? Like very important in the English language universe from the States. So it seems like we put all the covers online. I said, let's grab them and analyze them. So he told me on Friday, and Monday project was ready. You know, I'm all for this, you know, European, EU projects with applications which are 2,000 pages, which even feed 200 postdocs. It's also nice just to simply get an idea, do it, the way like artists do it, right? So our projects take 4 years and then we finish, or we take like 2 days. So what it is, right? I mean, we can zoom in. Nice. Nice, right? Nice. There's probably Tito somewhere in the cover, right? But you can go to New York, you know, to Time Magazine website. You can search for Tito, you'll find him, but you're not going to find bigger patterns. So what we did here, I mean, and again, the point is we don't just make one visualization. We visualize it in every possible way, so it's just one slice. So what it is, right? Each cover, right, is situated according to when it was published, right, from 1923. So it's all black and white. And when we go, right, we start getting color, but color is still expensive, not all the covers. And then we go all the way to 2009. So it takes a second for it to catch up. So it's being still. And then vertically, we position of each cover, we basically measure just one characteristic, which is saturation, right? So saturation would be, okay, let's say, like you see this thing here behind me, it's gray. So that saturation is probably close to 0. This is much more saturated, that's more saturated. So basically saturation means how pure the color is, right? I love this room, guys. I just want to live here. Because I like this saturated but still nuanced colors. It's amazing. And you know, like, you see how my bag, it's exactly the same color. It's mandarino duck bag, which I got a few years ago in Bangkok, so it's just, I was waiting for invitation to come here. Okay, so now what's interesting, right? Now we start seeing this kind of zeitgeist, right? We start seeing this almost geological time of culture, which is what you get with the so-called big data. So in this case, we have about 4,500 covers, right? 52 covers per year. And what you see is kind of patterns of saturation, there seem to be some kind of invisible hand going on. You see it goes up, when it goes down. So that's very similar to what we see with Time magazine, except Time magazine looked like about, what, 40 years, and in this case we look at 86 years, and I did this first, right? So Time magazine 2018, mine was like 2009, but it doesn't matter. But of course, we measure just one thing. So we can ask interesting questions, right? We can say, first of all, we can say, okay, when is the Time magazine covers reach most saturated moment? So here it is. Of course, in the 60s. In the 60s, everything is more saturated, right? And we can say, well, I mean, that's an anecdotal thing, but you guys, you like it because only former Yugoslavia, people will get me, right? We can say, okay, whatever, we can say, okay, sorry, we say whatever most saturated covers. Okay, so I hope, okay, right? So Brezhnev, what was the guy in Vietnam? Vietnamese one. And then what's interesting, it's Araf, no, what's the guy in Egypt? So, yeah, and then Beatles, and also Wonder Woman, right? So basically it's like pop music, powerful females, and communist leaders. Right? Anyway, but this is fun. But then what's more interesting for me, is that you can say, what is the width, right? Like the width of a slice at each point. So what you can see is that from this measurement in the beginning, right, variability is not so big, maybe because also the color can be very saturated. And then we can see how, let's say, in the 60s, it's bigger, right? So there's a bigger range of like visual expression on just one parameter. And then in the 70s, we have crisis, right? Like the 60s, and then it gets smaller. And then it gets bigger again. And then actually, surprisingly, same thing we found as the Time found, right? You would expect this trend would go up and things would just become like more and more aggressive. But actually, with this kind of minimalism comes in 2000s, right? This, right? And in fact, there is lots of covers which are simply black and white, right? So again, what's nice is that it's a graph, so you don't need to know about statistics, and you can see it. And in fact, in this case, it's really not diversity, it's variability, right? How spread is the data? But the limitation is, of course, it's only one parameter. And it's probably impossible to measure every single characteristic of magazine cover because we don't know how communication works, we don't know how images work, we don't know how brain works. I went to neuroscience in mid-80s, and when I left, I said too early. So while these measures are very interesting, I can't claim that they account for the whole gestalt of your perception. Anyway, let's look at something else. Okay, one more. Right. So maybe some of you know about this, everybody knows about Facebook and Twitter, but there are dozens and dozens of social network or media sharing networks, which are kind of more interesting because we don't have billions of people. Like Behance is one of them. And now one is DeviantArt. So I think in the last few years, it becomes less popular because people have Tumblrs, right, and Instagrams. But it was very popular in 2000. So it started in 2000 by kind of fans, and then now it became a company. So what it is that it's basically people, right, they register, and they submit their artistic creations. So it's a kind of platform for, you can say, non-professional art. And what was interesting, the reason we wanted to analyze it, it turns out that over 10 years, the members, right, the users, have introduced new categories to describe what we upload, and by 2010 there was over 1,700 categories. So it's interesting, right? Because if you go to MoMA, if you go to Museum of Modern Art in any country, there's maybe 5 departments, right? Painting, works on paper. Well, actually, so here the fans give us a much more interesting anatomy, right? And you find, right, all kinds of stuff. Like for example, digital art. We can say, okay, what is digital art? Actually, it seems like we don't. Yes, sure, okay. There's fan art. There's resource. There's tutorial. Yeah, tutorial is a genre of contemporary art, right? How do you do something? So it gets very interesting. So we started to work. We basically downloaded a sample of 1 million artifacts, 1 million artworks over 10 years. And again, it's kind of a bit similar to what Times did, but again, we did this in 2010. When we started to first of all explore this hierarchy, so it turns out the hierarchy of categories was like up to 6 levels deep. So I'll show you one visualization of it. Yeah, so this is, okay guys, it's a bit hard to see. So this is our visualization of a whole category system, right? Okay, right? So now we get, it's like we can get to almost to, well, not Darwin, but maybe Lamarck, right? Cultural biology. And again, this by itself is already amazing, right? Because it gives us a very different taxonomy, right? Of, kind of popular understanding of art and culture, right? So under miscellaneous, we find sci-fi and pop art and psychedelics and dark. And under drawings, we have technical and political and macabre. And then we get, let's see what else we get. We get all kinds of stuff. There's also poetry, abstract and surreal, invertebrates. And then it gets very interesting, right? So it turns out that because, right, about 30% of this website is so-called digital art category. So there's a new kind of classification where people create these communities around different tools, right? So there's Cinema 4D. So in fact, I'm not going to show it because it's a bit boring. So we actually analyze how this category system grows over time. And what we found is that the number of categories in digital art was always twice as much. So that's interesting by itself. But what I want to show you is something else, where we try to apply this kind of more visual analysis. Okay, just let me show you where it is. Okay, and again, right, it's very limited because again, right, what we should have done is what Time did and similar researchers to use many measures and combine them. And I can go home and do it, but in this case, it's only 2 measures. So we basically downloaded. We took all the artifacts, all right, all the artworks in our 1 million sample from just 2 top categories, traditional art and digital art. So about 90,000 and 180,000. And then we plotted them, a bit similar to how we plotted time covers, but using 2 dimensions, so you can probably guess, right, that horizontal dimension is, again, lightness. So here we have lightest ones, here we have darkest ones. And the vertical one is also, I think, saturation. Okay? So it's like this 2-dimensional kind of 2-dimensional slice of this data set. So again, one of these visualizations is 90,000 images from a digital art category. I mean, that's what basically people who submit works as digital art. And the second one is traditional art. So what do you think? You know, and here we can also, you can see right away that one is more diverse, right? Meaning, from point of view, so this one, from point of view 2 dimensions, it covers more space, right? So this has always light, always light, always light, all the light images, which one doesn't have, but we want to be sure we can measure it, but it kind of feels like it, right? And also, see, this one has all this gray stuff, this one has all the gray ones, okay? So which one is digital art and which is traditional art? What do you guys think? Which one? This left? What is it? You think it's what? Traditional. Yes. You get, exactly. Why?
I don't know. I'm experimenting with the answer.
No, it's perfect. Well, I will tell you why. Because, you know, what do you do in traditional art? You go to art store, you buy white paper and you draw. So it has always drawings on white paper. Okay? Whereas if we do digital art, you can actually change background color in any time. So now you get all these things, because you know many things look very elegant on gray, right? Like gray. Right? So there's always gray backgrounds. And if you go to art store, actually, it's maybe in a small village, you can't even buy gray paper, right? So actually, it turns out, if you actually measure it, this one is more diverse. But again, right? So ideally, you want to measure the subject of a drawing, the style of a drawing, so it gets very, very complex. So again, I don't claim that this is like the truth, but nevertheless, it is interesting. So now just a few words, right? It's okay, just 10 minutes. So about my new project. So basically, I've been doing it, and when I got a bit, you know, disappointed with results, I said, it's very interesting, but obviously, it's very limited, because maybe I can compare 2 sets of images or 2 sets of films in terms of 1 dimension, but there are many dimensions. So I said, I want to maybe become more conservative because I'm getting older. I want to go back to something which is easy to measure, which is text. This text is discrete, right? Words have meaning, this is chair, this is some gadget, right? With a light coming out, right? With a people, so it's very easy to count these things in the text. And also I wanted to get back to my kind of first dream of actually creating some kind of preliminary, open to correction, interpretation, comments, critique map of contemporary culture. So we designed this new project. The project is called Elsewhere. The project is called Elsewhere, and just a second, here it is somewhere, just to show you. This is not this one, this one. Yeah. So in the previous project, right, we did about 6 projects with Instagram and Twitter, and then I became a bit uneasy because, as you know, 5 or 6 years ago, everybody was excited about social media. Now everybody hates it, right? And somehow people can't hold 2 ideas at the same time. But it did become kind of problematic to use social media because of privacy. Of course, there are millions of papers published in social sciences. People use it, but you anonymize the data. But in my case, we make visualizations of people images. I can't go ask a million people for permission. So we're publishing one of our papers in a very top scientific journal, +1, about DeviantART. And we had these visualizations where each image was like 1 pixel. We said, no, you can't use it. You have to get people's permission. I said, okay, no pictures. So I said, okay, no problem. I will do something else. And then I said, it's actually okay, because good things come from limitations, from constraints. Right? And remember how I started by talking with, this is a great festival, and what I want to know, how many festivals, let's say, of that size, or big or small, are taking place in every year. And there's a lot. So what I realized is that I actually don't need to look at images or Twitter posts or blog posts. I can actually look at things like festivals, exhibitions, fashion weeks, concerts. I can look at cultural events and use cultural event as my unit of analysis because there are so many of them. So I conceptualized the project 3 years ago, and then it's a very long story. If you like kind of Kafka, you will enjoy it. One day you should invite me back. I will tell you the story with slides. So I basically got invited by a university in Russia, in Tyumen, in Siberia. You have to know, Siberians, we kind of think of themselves as like free people. We kind of, if you can do things in Siberia, you can't do in Moscow. Right? So it's a bit like a Schengen, right, in China. And they invited me and they said that we want you to do a project because, your project seems like newspapers write about them. I said, well, I was lucky with selfies, but I can't guarantee it. We said, how much? So we're basically sitting in a restaurant. There's a guy, he's 38. He's, the provost of the university, 30,000 students. His assistant, she's like 36. We're both in labor. We have each one has 2 cell phones. I said, great, I can work with people. These people in America will be like at least 3 times older, right? So, okay, anyway, so it's a very interesting thing. But so they gave me money, and we said, do whatever you want. Just put in the corner, but this is supported by us. I said, do I have to make project with Russia? We said no. And they said, don't hire Russians because we don't know how to work. And I said, no, I want to make projects with Russians. So I actually hired like a top Russian company to collect the data. It was okay, but he was kind of right. So for visualizations, I'm going to work with German designers. It's just different. It's different. People who are so friendly, so warm, right, so spiritual, you can't put them into this Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of work frames, right? But there was one time when I went to Russia the last 4 years, it was great. It was Yandex. So everything was organized very well. But anyway, it's just different. So basically what we've done, we said, great. So we said, okay, during the last 20 years, the number of these places and events, cultural foundations, art galleries, right? Working places, interesting cafes, that's also culture became so big, but it's kind of big data. So I work with company who are friends of mine. In fact, the founder of this company, he's basically, how in many post-Soviet countries, basically all the intellectuals go into the IT because pays a bit more than being professor. So he was a dean of a top urbanism school in top Moscow University. After 3 years, he said too much paperwork. He said, I'm going to found a startup and actually use it to do my intellectual activity, right? So interesting people. So I said, well, let's find some kind of global platforms where organizations worldwide share data about their events. And of course, it's also impossible, because if you have English language platform, it will probably have more events in English. If you have Chinese one, we have more Chinese. So the biggest challenge of this project is how to deal with kind of limitations. But it's still very interesting. So we used a few data sets. Maybe you guys know about TED. So TED also sponsors, right, TED local events. You can organize like local TEDx. So, and we have like a list of all the TED locals from the last few years. We downloaded it was like 30,000. We also took eFlux. So eFlux, it's a mailing archive from New York, where galleries and museums, pay like a few €100 and to advertise their exhibitions, and then it goes to 200,000 people, just like art world thing. And then, Meetup, maybe you don't know. So Meetup is this platform, American platform, which people use to organize events. And again, it's used in a lot of countries. And then there's Behance. So Behance, again, is a global, right, platform for people to share creative portfolios. But again, it's an English platform. So we also included 4 Russian platforms, just to kind of have a balance. But together, we have about over 6 million events for about 15 years. And I will show you just a few graphs, just to get started. And 5 minutes is okay still? 5 minutes is okay, right? Yeah. So now comes the fun part. So I think for the first time, I showed a few graphs a couple of days ago in Ljubljana, and I'll show you more. We just finished analysis of data late August. So I'm finishing my new book about all that stuff in 5 days, because I have deadlines from press, and after that I will start using this data to analyze changing patterns of variability. Like, for example, we can say, okay, what are the top 100 keywords used in these descriptions of all these events in 2013 versus 2019? Is it more keywords, less keywords, right? It's because we're going to do text analysis. But for now, I'll just show you kind of basic metadata. That's cool. Okay. So first of all, right, this is the biggest problem with the number, right? The size of the data is very different from one data set to another. This is all sources, right? This shows you growth every month. This is the Russian time pad, right? It grows more, eFlux grows less. But if you look at the y-axis, the numbers are very different, right? So how do we compare a data set which has 4 million events and a data set which has 4,000 events? I don't know. So if you know some super smart physicist or biologist, or you're just smart yourself in this quantitative way, I need your help. So this is just looking at particular regions. So we made these graphs. We're not visualization people, so graphs are a bit ugly. So what you have is red line. That's the number of places. So basically, we extracted all the city names. So you can see how the number of cities grows over time. This is Eastern Asia. And the number of events in the data set grows more, right? So we can simply say, when does it start to grow, and what's the shape of its growth? So here we can see, right, it's pretty steep, and it seems like there's a kind of point around 2000 maybe 12 or 2013. So after about 2012, it really shoots up. So that's Eastern Asia. This is Western Africa. And in fact, the only part of Africa which really kind of has enough data on these platforms is Western Africa. And here you can see the growth starts a bit later. So I know it's very partial, I know it's very biased, but I'm super excited because I feel for the first time like I'm really looking at certain dimensions of global culture from a telescope and seeing kind of these patterns, right? So we can see, and also interesting how, but of course the scale is very different. So here we have 60 per month, and here we have like 3,000, right? And then just for fun, this is US. So US, okay, very, very steady growth, right? Very, very steady growth. So nothing happens. So that's one type of graph. I mean, obviously we made it for every country, so I'm just showing a little bit. And then this is actually all the data. And this is the real size, right? So of course, Well, not of course, but I guess as you expect, because this is platforms which are American, but they're global, but they're in English. You do have more events from English language countries, right? So yellow line is North America. And all of Europe is basically as much as America, right? And of course, that's not true, right? Obviously, like in Rijeka itself, you probably have more festivals every month and in all of state of Idaho, but maybe you don't advertise them as global platforms. So this is super, super biased, but it's still something, right? And then you have our countries, right? So the bottom line is Africa. But again, the growth itself is interesting, right? So what's interesting is when, again, like America and Europe, the growth rate, the shape, it's exactly the same, right? So you can say, Lev, this is very problematic, because are you actually measuring the growth of culture as represented by events, or are you simply measuring how more and more organizations start using these platforms to advertise? I think it will be possible to figure it out, but I'm not at that stage yet. I actually need like really people who maybe have experience in this. So maybe it's both. And then this is the last graph. So this is using log scale. So that's why the lines look weird. And this is not all the regions. So I kind of took America out because obviously it'll be on top. So this is basically combining just selected regions, right? And again, the lines are less steep because that's like log scale. So 100, 100. And what we can see is that, of course, guys, I'm from Moscow, right? So this, you guys are, well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say it, maybe you hate me, but I feel myself as a bit outsider to the West, right? I lived in America 38 years. Somebody has to do it, right? But the project is called Elsewhere because its goal is not just to measure and make pretty maps, but its goal is basically Trojan horse. The goal is to make people in the West or Asia to realize, actually, there's always activity happening somewhere else. And, because I think people in maybe Paris, or even Berlin, or even Vienna, people in Vienna, we never go to Bratislava, right? So I go, right, I visit, I travel a lot, so I know about all this, right, cutting edge cultural activity, intellectual activity, in all these quote-unquote developing countries. And specialists know, but how do you make it visible, right? So that's why we also need to make pretty pictures. So what's interesting here, so yellow, right? Yellow is Western Europe. So this is all the events now in Western Europe, so it grows, grows, grows. And then this is blue one, is Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe next year will be even, right? So, so that's it. So, so I haven't shown you measurements of diversity in the data set. We did some measurements for me, but I'm going to do some more. There are obviously limitations to this data set, there are limitations to these measurements. And is it a scientific project? Is it an art project? Is it a propaganda project about Elsewhere? Well, it's a bit of both. I will try to be objective, but I will also try to write very passionate text. And maybe what I'll do is the last thing is to show you the text I wrote about this project. And don't think that I'm crazy, I'm running 2 labs. No, I still have cultural analytics lab. But in order for people in Tumen to hire me, we have to have a lab. I said, but it's going to be just me. Well, just for paperwork, You guys understand these things. So it's called lab, but it's basically me and the person who does all the paperwork for me and for her. But, so that's the description. And this was the abstract I sent here. And one of the organizers said that she loved it. So just read the abstract and I'll shut up. Today, a small number of world capitals get disproportionate amount of attention, media, research studies, and various ratings. So it's easy to assume that a handful of top cities continue to act as the centers, and the rest of the world is still a periphery, receiving new ideas with delay. But what is the real picture? How did globalization and the rise of new communication technologies change the geography of culture? Can we find every contemporary cultural trends in thousands of smaller cities? So by the way, our data set with 6 million events, when we extracted cities, it's like 50,000 cities worldwide, right? So it's going to be first analysis of like some kind of cultural trends, which includes 50,000 cities, right? So far, biggest one is about 160 European cities, but typically it's a few dozen cities. So, and then comes very interesting. Is it possible, it's about you guys, right? Is it possible that some of the smaller cities are more culturally innovative precisely because of the distances from the capitals and smaller size? Right? When I travel to Moscow every month, every time I go, it feels like much more like New York and London. So I like going to Tyumen or Minsk or Kiev. But what's really going on? Well, I'm not sure my intuitions are correct. And maybe measurement is not the correct way, but at least like a different view. And then, of course, you can say, are there any empty places, right? Are there any empty places in the world still which are really outside? You know? And then this is basically about time. How did contemporary culture develop and diffused around the world? Let's say since we can't really measure 90, so our data set starts in 2003, but it's 15 years. How was the growth even accelerating or slowing down? For example, what was the effect of economic crisis in 2008? And then this is basically what this is about. And I appreciate your time. I was very nervous, actually. So I only slept 3 hours. So usually I'm much better. So I hope some of it was clear. And if not, I'm here. And again, thank you for your attention. And if you want to collaborate, always looking for people. I can't offer lots of money, but I can offer you a big first offer on a joint paper, because that's how our best projects came about. Like, right, I'm kind of busy and tired, and I want to go swimming, and when some smart student comes, let's do it. Our first project about Instagram was because some student from Israel showed up. So I love collaboration, and also I love critique, because obviously this project is so problematic, I don't even know how to start. And maybe because it's so problematic, it's still fun to do. Thank you so much.